Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Notes on 5 Rules of Getting Wealthy, Episode 5. I'm Dr. Prosper Tettey Doe in the United Kingdom. And this is from the international bestseller on the Rules of Wealth by Richard Templar. And you are welcome to 5 of the rules of getting wealthy. In this session, we'll be discussing spend less than you earn. Don't borrow money unless you really have to. Consider consolidating debts. Cultivate a skill, and it will repay you over and over again. Pay off your loans and debts as a priority. So, Rule 40, it says spend less than you earn. You should live within your means, but live well enough to be happy. If you don't earn enough to have a particular item, then if you can't have it every week, you can have it once a month. Now, we'll talk later about how to curb spending and make savings, and how to cut up your credit cards if they've let you down. They do that sometimes. You need to know the following also. Any expenditure that is likely to come up, any provision you've made for contingency plans, any future income you may be entitled to in the way of interest or investment coming to fruition. All this you need to take note of. And the biggest mistake is not knowing what you are doing, where you are financially, and what is up ahead of you. These are the biggest threats. We go on to rule number 41, which says don't borrow money unless you really have to borrow. If someone lends it, they will want it back with a plus. And that plus is what kills most of us and stops us from becoming prosperous. It has to be nipped in the bud. And if it's too late for that, then it needs to be severely pruned. We have to get rid of that plus. And note, if someone lends it, they will want it back with a plus. I have a friend who started his own business with 3 friends. They all put in £500 and ran the business for 15 years. Then they sold it for £43 million. Yes, and not a penny was borrowed. The upshot was they had to share with no one. And at times like this, you don't want to share, no matter what your parents said about how we all should learn to share. And when you are starting a business, advisors often say it's okay to borrow off people you know because they are willing to support you, etc. But the novelist Jilly Cooper says She is worried of lending money to friends, as it is terribly difficult to see someone at Christmas and give them a hug, knowing they owe you £10,000. Personally, I would find it hard to hug someone who owed me a lot less than that. So try not to borrow from the following: your parents, your children, other people's children, friends, lovers, passing strangers, loan sharks, the city, banks, credit card companies, offshore investment banks of any sort, and me, the author says. Now we go on to rule number 42. Consider consolidating debts. What I'm talking about here is stopping using 3 or 4 credit cards, plus an overdraft, plus a bank loan, plus other borrowings. It is possible to consolidate all of them into one loan. Tear up the cards as if you need industrial strength scissors. And here speaks a man who has cut up many a credit card, and pay off the overdraft. A word of warning, however: if you do consolidate your debts, make sure you aren't turning short-term debts into long-term debts. The idea is strictly to pay off debt quickly, and don't forget that good old standby, which is cash. If you do decide to consolidate your debts, here are some useful tips. I have a friend who wrote to all his creditors and offered them an immediate payment of 50% if they would write the debt off. This included all his credit card people. Surprisingly, every single one of them said yes, and he took out a bank loan and paid them all off without having to declare himself bankrupt. He thus consolidated his debts and reduced them by half. That's brilliant. Also, never ever respond to any adverts from companies offering to consolidate your debts for you. Those ads are for people with more money than sense, the author says. Also, shop around for any payoffs loans. Don't accept your banks just because it is your bank. They may not be the cheapest by a long way. And don't secure anything against your home ever, under any circumstances. If you do, you could lose your home if you don't keep up repayments. Is anything worth this risk? I don't think so. Also, check the small print regarding early settlements and make sure you aren't going to be penalized if you settle early. Also, only ever take out one loan to consolidate, and only do this once. Learn your lesson and move on. And also pay off as quickly as you can afford. The longer the term, the more you will have to pay in interest. And if you must borrow, borrow against an asset you can resell. For example, machine tool, delivery van, and try not to borrow more than the resale value. Also, buying on credit is a bit different. When Jack Cohen started Tesco, he negotiated the rent for his shop to be paid 3 months in arrears. He paid for his stock 3 months in arrears and started taking money over the counter on day 1. By day 90, he had taken a lot more than he owed. Now we move on to rule number 43, which says, cultivate a skill and it will repay you over and over again. We know the story of the piper, which says, and the saying that says, he who pays the piper calls the tune. That's true, but the piper can decide how much he will charge for playing that tune. If what he plays is, for example, in demand, it's rare and particularly difficult, or in some way unique to play. So get yourself a decent instrument, a decent set of tunes, an unusual or quirky PR approach, create a name for yourself, and the world will beat a path to your door and pay you handsomely. Once you can do something no one else can do, or as few people as is possible, you can pretty well name your price. So what it means is that you need to think about what you've got to offer. What are your skills? What are your talents, your strengths and weaknesses? Who needs those skills? How could you put them to best use? How do you tell the people who need these skills that you have them? And what skill might you be able to master in order to meet a need that's out there waiting to be met? And once you can do something no one else can do, or as few people as is possible, you can pretty well name your price. We all have a dream we could follow, a plan we dare carry out. Perhaps all we need is a shove, a push in the right direction, a wake-up call to get up off our backside and actually do something. Well, this is it. Wake up. Get on with it. We end with the rule number 44, which says, pay off your loans and debts as a priority. And we know that death bogs us down and holds us back. The very first thing you need to do on your wealth quest is to get loans and debts paid off as soon as possible and do nothing else until that is done. The simple truth is that those who borrow almost always pay a higher rate of interest than the rates received by those who save. I acknowledge that you may in fact have found a special situation where you can borrow money at a very low rate of interest and believe you can invest that money for a bigger return. But I say be very, very, very careful indeed. You are playing with fire here. And unless the investment is absolutely risk-free, which I doubt, pay the debt or loan off as fast as you probably can. And also note that there are some exemptions to this rule. For example, If you have borrowed to invest in, say, a business, and you really know what you are doing, we are really talking mainly about personal debt in this rule. And start by paying off the highest interest debt first if you have more than one. Motivation is vital, as this is short-term pain for long-term gain. And note, we don't include mortgages in this category, by the way. Although strictly speaking, it is a loan, it is an investment, we hope, and therefore is a special case. So, thank you very much. We have covered the 5 rules of getting wealthy. Spend less than you earn. Don't borrow money unless you really have to. Consider consolidating debts. Cultivate a skill, and it will repay you over and over again. And pay off your loans and debts as a priority. And I wish you all the best, even as you apply this episode 5 on the notes on 5 rules of getting wealthy.